The morning air held a tantalizing mix of fragrances that spoke of untouched wilderness and the damp whispers of the coming night. It was this scent that welcomed the Carter family as they stepped with a mixture of reverence and anticipation into the dense embrace of Ashwood Forest. This yearly pilgrimage to the woods was their tradition, a brief escape from the clamor of civilization, a time to reconnect with nature and each other. Autumn had laid her touch upon the forest, setting the canopy ablaze with colors that seemed to burn under the soft caress of the sun. The woods thrummed with life, each leaf and twig pulsating in an unseen rhythm, the trees standing as silent sentinels that observed the family's passage with an air of ancient knowing. Michael Carter, the patriarch, took the lead, his boots crunching over the carpet of fallen leaves. His stature was solid, reassuringly earthbound, with a beard that was more salt than pepper, speaking of the years he'd spent watching over his family. The lines on his face were like the rings of a tree, each one telling a story of laughter, worry, and the passage of seasons. Sarah, his partner in life and love, walked with an easy grace that belied the tension evident in the slight furrow etched between her brows. Her auburn hair, once wild and untamed, was now pulled back into a ponytail that swayed with her steps, a testament to her transition from carefree youth to thoughtful matronhood. Her gaze would occasionally flicker to the dense underbrush, to the shadows that clung a little too persistently, as if sensing an unseen presence. Lagging a few steps behind were their children, the two most precious blossoms of their union. Lily, in the full bloom of her teenage years, mirrored her father's intense gaze, her eyes a vibrant echo of his spirit. She moved with the restless energy of one who is just beginning to sense the vastness of the world that awaits her. Sam, the youngest, was a stark contrast to his sister, his steps hesitant, a slight figure trailing in the wake of the others, as if afraid to disturb the forest floor too much. His small hand was enveloped in lilies, his grip tightening with every crack of a twig or rustle of leaves, seeking comfort in the connection. His wide eyes, reflecting a pure and unfettered imagination, darted from shadow to shadow, half expecting some woodland sprite or lurking creature to spring forth. They moved as a single unit, a family bound by blood in the shared rhythm of their hike, their breaths visible in the chilled air, mingling with the earthy exhalations of the forest. The ashwood enveloped them, its whispers seeping into their ears, a slow melody accompanying their journey into the heart of a wilderness that promised wonder, yet hinted at mysteries best left undiscovered. As the Carters ventured deeper into the untamed thicket of Ashwood Forest, the once friendly brush turned into a myriad of grasping fingers, each leaf and twig scrabbling at their clothes as if to whisper warnings, or perhaps to hold them back. They pushed forward, the forest floor now a thick tapestry of intertwined roots and moss-covered stones that threatened to trip them at every step. Michael, leading with the torch of his adventurous spirit, cut through the wilderness with a false bravado that seemed to shine from him like a beacon. "It's just a shortcut," he murmured, the words falling from his lips in a low hum that barely disturbed the hush around them. His voice was the thread of certainty in the enveloping blanket of doubt, the sound seeming to wrap around each family member, willing them to believe. But Sarah, her heart bound by cords of caution, felt the oppressive weight of the forest bearing down upon them. Her eyes, the color of the earth they trod upon, darted apprehensively to the cathedral-like canopy overhead. The trees, so majestic from the safety of the marked trail, now loomed like giants, their branches interlacing to form a barrier of leaves that filtered the sunlight into a kaleidoscope of moving shadows. These silhouettes played tricks upon her eyes, twisting and contorting into forms that defied the tranquility of nature. They danced, a macabre ballet in the corners of her vision, beckoning her gaze but vanishing when looked upon directly. "Let's just stick to what we know," she whispered, her words like the gentle rustle of dry leaves underfoot. The tremor in her voice betrayed her innermost fears, a delicate vibration that seemed to resonate with the subtle trembling of the leaves. Her whispered plea hung in the air, dense and heavy, refusing to be carried away by the occasional breeze that sighed through the forest. Her suggestion, so softly spoken, was like the drop of a pebble into the vast silence of the woods, a silence that seemed to be listening, waiting. It was an emotional tug-of-war between her innate desire for the safety of the known and the pull of the untrodden path that Michael now navigated with unwitting zeal. The children sensed the shift in the air, the tension as palpable as the humidity that clung to their skin. Lily, her hand gripping Sam's with a protectiveness that belied her years, felt a twinge of alarm. There was something thrilling about deviating from the plan, a thread of excitement that was now intertwined with a ribbon of dread. Sam, ever sensitive to the unspoken currents of his family, kept glancing up at his parents, seeking reassurance in their faces. His youthful imagination, once filled with the innocent wonder of adventure, now teetered on the precipice of a fear that was as real to him as the brambles that snagged at his sleeves. And so, with every step away from the well-trodden path, the Carters moved further into the embrace of the ancient forest. They ventured onward, bound together by the unspoken love and trust that had always been their compass through the trials of life. Yet, with each step, the forest's embrace seemed to tighten, a silent sentinel warning them that this path was not just another route, but a journey into the very heart of the unknown. As the Carters delved into the heart of the Ashwood, the forest seemed to close in around them, a living entity whose breath was the whisper of leaves, and whose pulse was the sound of their own footsteps muffled by the mossy floor. With each step taken on this forsaken path, the air grew heavier, ripe with the musk of rotting wood and the loamy scent of the earth, which seemed to cling to their clothes and skin. Young Sam's imagination was no longer filled with the light-hearted fantasies of a boy's adventure. It had been invaded by a creeping dread, a sense that they were trespassing into a realm not meant for human presence. His little heart, usually so buoyant and full of joy, now felt like it was being weighed down by invisible stones. Every so often he would halt, his eyes wide and searching the shadowy enclaves between the trees. It was as if the forest itself was gazing back at him, its myriad unseen eyes fixed upon his small form, tracking his every move with a curiosity both ancient and unsettling. To dispel the growing tension, Lily would offer her brother a smile, one that never quite reached her eyes, which kept darting to the silent sentinels of trees that stood watching. "Monsters are shy, you know," she would chide gently, attempting to inject humor into the dense, whispering stillness of the woods. Yet her words seemed to fall flat, the sound of her voice barely rising above a murmur before being absorbed by the thicket. It was as though the forest were consuming her attempts at comfort, her mirth dissipating like mist in the undergrowth, leaving behind an echo that sounded too much like a soft, mocking sigh. Sarah, with a mother's instinct, found her gaze lingering on her children, taking in the forced levity of Lily's demeanor and the quiet terror etched onto Sam's face. It wrenched at her heart, the desire to protect them from the ominous embrace of the forest growing stronger with every forced chuckle from Lily's lips, with every anxious glance from Sam's wide, fearful eyes. Their advance through the forest became a reluctant march, a slow and steady progression that resembled a ritualistic dance within a temple of nature, the trees serving as towering pillars, the slivers of sky glimpsed through the canopy as a ceiling far removed from their reach. The deeper they went, the more tangible Sam's intuition of being surveilled became. It was as if the forest held its breath when they passed, whispering secrets behind their backs, secrets that rustled through the leaves with a sound like words just beyond the edge of understanding. In this secluded corner of the world, untouched and ancient, the Carters found themselves ensnared. They pressed forward, not just through the physical space of tangled undergrowth and overreaching branches, but through a palpable presence that hovered all around them, a presence that seemed almost to hum with the voices of the forest, a symphony of the unseen that resonated with the ageless and profound depths of the wild. Dusk descended upon the Carter family like a shroud, the light of day retreating as if in fear, leaving the forest cloaked in the ambiguity of twilight. The trees, which had appeared almost benevolent under the sun's gaze, now transformed into foreboding silhouettes against a dimming sky. With the encroaching darkness, the whispers of the forest grew more insistent, as if nightfall had awakened the voices of the ashwood, an ancient chorus rising and falling with the wind through the pines. Michael stood tall, a silent figure wrestling with the duality of his pride and the primal, instinctive urge to flee back to the safety of familiar trails. The orange hues of the sunset, which bled into the blues and grays of the evening sky, served as a stark reminder of their vulnerability in this untamed expanse. The debate with Sarah was a low murmur, a back and forth punctuated by glances over shoulders and eyes that searched the creeping shadows. They both knew that with every minute spent deliberating, the forest's grip tightened, and the path home grew ever more obscured by the night. Sarah, her maternal concern now tinged with the unease that clawed at her chest, argued for retreat with a voice edged in urgency. Yet, Michael's response was weighed down by a reluctance to concede to the forest, to admit that their adventure could indeed be their folly. It was as if admitting defeat would give the ashwood even more power over them. Still, their discourse was futile, for the sun had dipped below the horizon, and with it, their opportunity to leave this place unclaimed by the night had vanished. Wrapped in her own arms, Lily shivered, the biting chill of the evening air cutting through her jacket as if it were made of paper. Her every exhalation was a cloud of visible breath, a ghostly evidence of the dropping temperature. The forest's whispers seemed to her a menacing lullaby, a soundtrack to the unease that settled in her bones. Her attempts to appear unaffected for Sam's sake were betrayed by the tightness of her embrace, the way her body seemed to fold into itself for warmth and protection. And little Sam, with a child's vivid imagination now running rampant, interpreted every rustle, every whispering sigh of the wind, as a malevolent force conspiring against them. The whispers did not speak in words he understood, yet their message was clear and filled with dark intent. In his mind's eye, each whisper transformed into a sinister vow from the shadows, a promise that they were not alone, that eyes he could not see watched with an intent as sharp as the thorns that snagged at their clothes. The forest, alive with these murmurs, seemed to close in around them. Its voice was not just one, but many, a cacophony of soft, insidious sounds that slithered between the trunks and leaves. It was as though the ashwood was calling out to its denizens, alerting them to the presence of these intruders, the carters, who had dared to stray from the path and now found themselves ensnared in a web woven from the very essence of the forest itself. Under the shelter of an oak, whose age was etched into the twisted tapestry of its bark, the carters pitched their temporary sanctuary. This venerable tree, with branches gnarled and stooped from centuries of silent vigil, stood as a somber guardian over their makeshift camp. It was as if the tree itself bore the weight of untold stories, its limbs groaning softly, with the burden of age-old secrets, creaking and sighing like the weary bones of the very earth upon which they now trespassed. In the midst of this solemn amphitheater, they kindled a fire that seemed to fight for its life, the flames lashing out against the creeping chill of nightfall. It spat defiance at the darkness, a crackling, fierce heart in the dimness. Yet it also birthed monstrous shapes that leaped and twisted among the trees. These silhouettes, spawned from the fire's capricious play, joined the natural cacophony of the nighttime forest, a visual symphony of fears made manifest. Their meal was consumed in a quietude that felt almost reverent, as if they were loath to disturb the cathedral-like stillness that the night had draped over the forest. Each morsel was chewed thoughtfully, the usual joy of dining under the stars, now subdued by the pervasive sense that they were being observed by unseen congregants of the woods. The oppressive silence was a shroud, woven from the threads of apprehension that tightened around them, a cloak that muffled their voices and heightened their senses. The paranoia that nestled amongst them had sprouted wings, fluttering against the walls of their resolve, casting ever-growing shadows of doubt and fear. It thrummed in their veins, a living entity birthed from the whisper of leaves and the stealthy movements just beyond the firelight. It was as though the very air they breathed was thick with the pulse of hidden watchers, the breath of creatures unknown. Sarah's fingers, which passed the water with a minor tremor, met Michael's in a fleeting caress that spoke volumes of their shared disquiet. His returned grip was a lifeline, a silent promise that they were in this together, despite the cloak of foreboding that seemed to settle upon their shoulders. Lily's usual spark was dampened, her voice an absent player on this stage of shadows, while Sam, a boy who found wonder in the crevices of everyday life, clung to her side, his wide eyes reflecting the flickering uncertainty of their flame-encircled haven. The fire's dance was a desperate defiance against the encroaching oblivion, a stand against the night which sought to engulf them. The Carters, gathered in its fragile halo of warmth, became an enclave of light amidst an ocean of obsidian. With each hour that passed, that dark ocean seemed to rise, threatening to breach their island of safety, to douse their light with the insatiable tide of the nocturnal wilderness. They were for a night denizens of a realm not their own, partaking in an ancient ritual of survival, their presence a note in the symphony of the Ashwoods nocturne. The night was no longer a mere backdrop to their rest, but a living tableau, and they, the unwilling subjects, were etched into its dark tapestry, their pulse a beat in the heart of the forest's unsettling lullaby. That night, the fabric of dreams and reality blurred for young Sam as he was jolted awake by an unnerving sensation of being watched. His heart was a frantic drummer in his chest, pounding out an alarm as his eyes, wide and questioning in the dark, met with a pair of luminous orbs that hovered in the void beyond the dying embers of their campfire. They shone with an eerie, unwavering intensity, like twin moons suspended in the ink-black firmament of the forest night. For a moment, he lay petrified, his breath caught in a silent gasp, the cold sweat of terror a sheen upon his skin. Struggling against the suffocating fear, he yearned to call out for the comfort of his parents, to break the spell of those haunting eyes with the sound of familiar voices. Yet the only thing that escaped him was a stifled whimper as he shrunk deeper into the imagined safety of his sleeping bag, the nylon fabric a poor shield against the specters of the night. The eyes observed him, a still, silent sentinel, and then, with a deliberate blink that seemed to stretch across eons, they vanished, leaving Sam to question if they had been naught but a figment of his imagination. With the first blush of dawn casting a soft glow over the campsite, Sam wrestled with the tendrils of unease that lingered from his nocturnal encounter. The logical part of his young mind sought to dismiss the eyes as a trick of shadow and fading firelight, but the primal, instinctive part screamed a warning that was impossible to ignore. As he emerged from his cocoon, the world around him bathed in the reassuring light of day. The fear that had gripped him in the night began to dissipate like mist in the morning sun. Yet the memory of those eyes burned behind his lids, an after-image that refused to fade. At breakfast, he chewed his food with a mechanical motion, his appetite stolen by the indelible imprint of the night's terror. He longed to share his experience, to validate it through the concerned expressions of his family, to exorcise the fear with words spoken aloud, but a heavier fear, one of disbelief and dismissal from his family, pressed his lips into a tight line of silence. Throughout the morning's activities, Sam's gaze would flicker to the forest's edge, half expecting to see those eyes again, watching, waiting. But the trees revealed nothing, their branches swaying innocently in the gentle breeze. No sign remained of the nocturnal watcher, no proof that his encounter had been anything more than a child's overactive imagination. And so, with each step that took them deeper into the enigmatic depths of Ashwood Forest, Sam carried the silent burden of his fear, a solitary guardian against the unseen dangers that might lurk just beyond the veil of trees. He said nothing, the weight of the unsaid forming a knot in his throat, a secret pact between himself and the mysterious denizen of the dark woods. As the Carter family ventured forth the following morn, a creeping sense of disorientation began to unfurl within the group. The path, once marked by the subtle signs of previous travelers, had all but disappeared beneath a chaotic weave of nature's own making. The forest floor was a tapestry of roots, like gnarled fingers clawing from the earth, ensnaring their feet and obstructing their passage. Overhead, a dense interlace of branches veiled the sky, casting them in a premature twilight. Michael, ever the pillar of resolve, found his confidence waning as he stood surveying their surroundings, a growing realization of their plight clouding his features. His face, usually ruddy with the hardiness of outdoor life, grew pale, the lines around his mouth deepening as he contemplated their predicament. The compass he'd so trusted seemed now to spin with a mocking indecision, its arrow swaying like a pendulum between possibilities and despair. Beside him, Sarah fought valiantly to be the beacon of optimism they needed. Her voice, usually so full of gentle warmth, now carried a tinny note of forced cheer. "We'll find the trail again. Just keep going," she said, her words fluttering out like birds too frail to take flight. They hovered momentarily in the heavy air before falling, failing to inspire the certainty she so desperately aimed to project. The children sensed the shift in their parents. Lily's expression grew somber, mirroring the gravity of their situation, her youthful exuberance dimming like a cloud passing over the sun. Sam, on the other hand, clutched the straps of his backpack tighter, his knuckles whitening, his imagination once again kindling the fires of fright, with thoughts of what unseen creatures might make their home in such tangled depths. The forest seemed to close in around them, a verdant prison that tightened with every step. Each rustle in the underbrush was a whisper of warning, each creak of the towering trees a groan of foreboding. They pushed on, the brush scratching at their clothes and skin, a relentless reminder of their vulnerability in this wild labyrinth. As hours slipped by with no sign of the trail, Michael's forced calm began to crumble, his movements growing more erratic, his decisions tinged with a hint of desperation. Sarah's hands trembled, though she tucked them away, hoping the children wouldn't notice the cracks in her composure. They were a family adrift in an ocean of green, with no stars to guide them, their lifelines fraying with each fruitless step. Through thickets and thorns, under the oppressive gaze of the ancient woods, the Carters trudged forward. Their voices, when they spoke, were hushed and hollow, as if the forest demanded their silence, as if their plight was an unwelcome disturbance to the eternal stillness of the ashwood. The day's journey was marked not by distance covered, but by the slow erosion of hope, the unraveling of the thread that had always guided them back to safety. Lily, ever the free spirit of the Carter family, found herself momentarily captivated by the fragile grace of a butterfly. Its wings, a kaleidoscope of vivid hues, fluttered defiantly against the oppressive drabness of the surrounding forest. It was a fleeting splash of color, a whimsical dance that beckoned her away from the looming anxiety that had tightened around her family. She followed, her feet treading softly on the bed of fallen leaves, her eyes alight with childlike wonder, seeking a brief reprieve in the creature's simple beauty. As the butterfly led her in a delicate chase, Lily became an echo of her former self, the weight of their predicament lifting momentarily from her slender shoulders. The woods around her were transformed from a sinister enclave to a stage of enchantment, playing host to this small winged performer. Yet, in her innocent pursuit, the distance between herself and her family grew, one unsuspecting step at a time. Minutes stretched and twisted into hours, and the realization that she had strayed too far came crashing down upon her. Frantic, she spun around, calling out, but there was no reply, only the mocking call of a distant crow. The butterfly, her inadvertent guide into the unknown, had vanished, leaving her alone amidst the towering sentinels of the forest. Back at the makeshift camp, panic clawed at the hearts of the Carters as they came to terms with Lily's absence. "Lily," they called, their voices piercing the still air, carving through the silence with growing desperation. Michael's baritone merged with Sarah's soprano, a discordant harmony of fear. Sam's smaller voice joined the chorus, a plaintive note that seemed too tender for the cruelty of their situation. But the forest, indifferent to their plight, seemed to absorb their cries, muffling them beneath its canopy. The dense foliage acted as a barrier, their daughter's name dying on their lips, as if the trees themselves were unwilling to carry their pleas. They combed the area, their hands parting the brush, eyes searching for any sign of her, a scrap of clothing, a disturbed path, anything. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of deep purple and melancholy orange, a heavy blanket of despair settled over them. The darkening woods became a maze of shadows, each one a sinister specter that could be hiding their beloved Lily. The light of their flashlights danced with trembling urgency across the underbrush, a feeble defense against the encroaching night. The forest transformed with the fall of darkness, the once familiar shapes now strange and threatening. The rustle of leaves and the snap of a twig sounded like conspiratorial whispers. As if the forest held secrets it refused to share. Night fell like a verdict, sealing them in a world without their daughter, every moment stretching into an eternity of dread. Huddled together, the family clung to the faintest spark of hope, the warmth of their fire a small comfort against the cold expanse of their fear. They kept watch, eyes straining into the blackness, listening for a sign, a word, a footstep, anything to indicate that Lily would emerge from the forest's grasp, back into the safety of their arms. But as the hours passed, the oppressive silence of Ashwood Forest seemed to confirm their worst fears. Lily had vanished, and with her, a piece of each of their hearts, leaving them fragmented in the gloom of the unforgiving woods. The search for Lily became a desperate race against the forest's sprawling indifference. It was Michael who stumbled upon the creek, a gash of silver cutting through the dense undergrowth, its waters murmuring secrets as they flowed past. There, caught in the gnarled embrace of a root, was Lily's jacket. It was a vibrant splash of pink amidst the monochrome canvas of browns and greens, now torn and forlorn, a silent testament to the chaos of the night before. Michael's hands shook as he retrieved the jacket, the fabric cold and wet in his grasp. His voice, when he called out to the others, was laced with a torment that mirrored the jagged tear in the garment. Sarah's face blanched at the sight, her maternal instinct seizing upon the worst scenarios. They searched the banks of the creek, a growing sense of dread blossoming with each step. Lily's footprints, so clear at the water's edge, were soon taken by the current, leaving no trace of direction, no whispers of her passage. It was then, amid the hush of their despair, that young Sam's voice, small and fraught with remembered terror, pierced the morning stillness. He spoke of the eyes that had watched him in the night, twin orbs of eerie luminescence that blinked once before vanishing into the darkness. His confession tumbled out, words tripping over one another, a dam breaking under the pressure of his silent fears. The Carter family, already bound in the cold grip of uncertainty, felt a new shiver pass among them, a chilling revelation that something more than misfortune stalked these woods. The pieces of their harrowing experiences began to assemble into a sinister mosaic. The strange occurrences, the feelings of being watched, the unshakable sense of dread, and now, Lily's unexplained disappearance, all were brushstrokes in a picture too horrifying to contemplate. A grim understanding settled over them, as palpable as the mist that clung to the creek's surface. They were not alone in this vast ancient forest. They were intruders in a domain ruled by an unseen predator, a force as old and relentless as the Ashwood itself. The forest, with its impenetrable thickets and shadowy recesses, had become a malevolent entity, its every whisper and sigh a portent of danger. As they gathered close by the creek, the Carters were united not only by blood, but by the primal instinct of survival. They knew they had to find Lily, to protect Sam, to shield each other from the unspeakable that lurked just beyond the veil of trees. With each rustling leaf and snapping twig, they were reminded that they were the hunted, and the hunter was at home amid the oppressive silence and the watchful eyes of the forest. The air was heavy with the unspoken acknowledgement that their family bond was being tested by something far beyond their understanding. The woods around them seemed to close in, the light dimming, the shadows growing longer, as if the forest itself was conspiring to claim them, one by one. They clutched Lily's jacket to their chests, a token of hope and a banner of defiance, as they prepared to delve deeper into the heart of darkness that Ashwood had become. The Carters' final hours in the Ashwood forest were a tapestry of terror, each moment stitched with the threads of unrelenting fear. They huddled together, a small island of humanity adrift in an ocean of darkness. The night was complete, a shroud of black so dense it seemed to swallow sound and hope alike. Whispers that they had once dismissed as wind through leaves had transformed into an ominous chorus of murmurs, a sinister symphony that rose and fell with the unseen life of the forest. The murmurs deepened, coalescing into guttural growls that resonated in their chests, a primal language of threat that needed no translation. The family clung to each other, their bodies pressed close in a futile search for safety in numbers, their eyes wide and reflecting the last embers of their dying fire, darted frantically as they sought to penetrate the absolute darkness that surrounded them. Breaths came in shallow, trembling gasps, each one a silent prayer that dawn would come swiftly. But when the first tentative fingers of dawn stretched towards the canopy, seeking to dispel the horrors of the night with the promise of a new day, they were met with a fog as thick and unforgiving as the darkness had been. It crept through the trees like a living thing, a silent, creeping beast that enveloped everything in its suffocating embrace. The forest, which had seemed so alive with malevolent intent during the night, now appeared to be holding its breath, waiting. The Carters' last moments were a crescendo of panic and despair, their screams rising above the growls and the whispers, above the sound of rushing wind through the pines. Their voices were the pure expression of human fear, raw and wrenching, leaving a stain upon the very air of the forest. These screams, it was said, became etched into the bark of the pines, an enduring testament to their final, unendurable terror, a warning etched in wood for those who might come after, seeking the truth of the Carter family's fate. No trace of them was ever found, no clue as to their final resting place. The Ashwood Forest reclaimed its secrets, closing ranks around the mystery as tightly as the fog had closed around the Carters on that last fateful morning. The whispers of the wind through the trees carried their story, a tale of a slow burn of terror that seeped into the soil, into the roots, into the very essence of the place. And so the Ashwood remains, its silence a heavy presence, its whispers a constant reminder. They speak of the Carter family, of the shadows that dance between the realms of the seen and the unseen, of the growls that might be more than mere animals. The forest stands as a brooding entity, alive with memories and warnings, a testament to the darkness that dwells within, waiting for the next weary travelers to tread its forgotten paths.